Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile, and this is a show where we get to talk about sports, we get to talk about business, and we get to talk about everything in between. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, you know exactly what to do. Like and subscribe. Smash that like and subscribe button over on YouTube. Please, 5-star review on Spotify, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and say something really nice about me and my incredible guest today. I have Scott Stokely. He's a professional disc golfer, I guess. We'll get to that in a little bit. He's an author, speaker, teacher, coach, entrepreneur, all around. Barbecue sauce maker. We'll also get to that a little bit later. Scott, how you doing today, man?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you.
I hope when I go on someone's podcast one day, they introduce me as a barbecue sauce maker. I guess, is that like the pinnacle for you?
You know, it it was when I was approached with the idea. The person contacted me and said, "We want to put your face on barbecue sauce," and I said yes. And then he said, "Well, we haven't even talked about money yet." And my response was, "But I already said yes."
Yeah.
Why? So weird. Why not?
Shut up and take my money. Like that's as far as it gets, right?
Yeah.
Just take my money, put my face on some barbecue sauce. I think that's the pinnacle for a lot of people. One day, Scott, I aspire to be like you, sir. But until then, we'll keep doing this show just for fun. Scott, outside of asking people if they've ever had their face on barbecue sauce, my first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
You know, it's funny because while I'm older, I'm 53, and it has evolved over the years. Like, I loved to play when I was younger, but I didn't enjoy the playing as much as I enjoyed winning and beating people. It was a low self-esteem, insecurity thing, to be honest. When I've looked back, I wrote my autobiography growing up disc golf, and I've evaluated this. And my motives were really, I wanted to be a somebody. I wanted to be better than you. But that evolved over time to being something that I enjoyed doing. And now, honestly, it's as much as I love playing and competing, it's also a means to an end to live a life I want to live. So it's not one thing. It's changed over the years.
That is awesome. And I appreciate the honesty there, right? Like most people give me an answer and I get a lot of the same answers. I'm not saying any of them are wrong or any of them are right, but like the fact that, you hear about it kind of with a lot of athletes is like that guy doesn't like playing basketball. Like Bernie Williams, good example, New York Yankees center fielder, multiple time World Series champion. My cousins met him many times, and he said never ask him a single thing about baseball because he never really liked baseball that much. He was just really damn good at it and understood that that's going to put him ahead in life. He actually likes just talking about music. That's his favorite thing that he does. So, like, it's very interesting, and I appreciate you kind of talking about that. Like, you do like the sport, though, right?
Well, I love the elements of the sport. I love the people, first and foremost. They are my family. I don't have a formal family. My family is the community within the sport my whole life. I love the competition. I love training for competition and competing. I love that part of it. If I was on a desert island and there was a disc golf course and I had other things to do, I don't play a lot of disc golf. When I was younger, certainly I would have. But now just simply playing for playing is fun, but there's other things that are fun, a lot of them. So
I like that.
So but the competition and the family is always like that's always great.
That is awesome. I love that answer. I appreciate it, Scott. So I guess where do you take me back? Put me in the way back, the time machine. How was it a college campus? Because like any disc golf ultimate frisbee story always starts on a college campus, right? So I'm curious, where did you fall in love with this sport? Where did you find that you had the ability to play this sport at a very high level?
So it actually goes back way further than that.
Wow.
I played my first round of frisbee golf, we called it back then, on the world's first permanent frisbee golf course when it was the only course in the entire world. So I actually started at the beginning. Now we're up to 15,000 courses and 18 million players or some crazy number worldwide. But when I started, there was one course. So I was 7 years old. My dad had passed away. My mom would take me to all the local parks. Some had playgrounds I liked. Some had trees I liked to climb. One of them had a frisbee golf course. Nothing special about it. It was just one of the things that was in one of the parks, and when Mom chose that park, it's the thing I did. I didn't realize that it was special, or I don't think anyone knew it would be historic back then, but I certainly didn't realize that there weren't more. It was just that park game. Uh, but what happened was is the course bordered a very wealthy suburb of Los Angeles. Technically, it was in Pasadena, but it bordered Locking Out of Flint Ridge. And I was a blue collar kid growing up. Uh, the course was like 7 miles away, and I was in a blue collar neighborhood. But my mom's business became successful when I was 11 years old. She moved us to Locking Out of Flint Ridge, and I became the blue collar kid in the rich, wealthy suburb. I was the kid that didn't fit in. I didn't have the most expensive bike. I didn't have the designer clothing. It was basically, it was a John Hughes movie from the 80s. Like that was barely an exaggeration to how it was. I didn't fit in. But here was this place where there were a bunch of grown men, which in hindsight, having lost my dad, I think I clung to them, playing this game, but they weren't, barely any of them were from Locking Out of Flint Ridge. They were all blue collar people. They were my people. A lot of them were hippies. A lot of them were, I call them misfits back then. And but that was the group that adopted me. So I didn't like the town I was in. I didn't make friends, but I was adopted by the local Frisbee golf club, the Oak Grove Gophers. So that's where I got sucked into it. I loved playing, but that was my community, my only community back then.
That is incredible. What are the chances that it's just one of the parks that your mom would bring you to, right? And then it springs into this career, this life that you've been able to build for yourself. Some ups, some downs along the way, of course, but just it's just, I always love stories like that because you easily could have not went to that park, right? As you said, there were multiple parks. Maybe your mom just, maybe the traffic was too much. Maybe she, didn't really feel like driving that far, right? Like it's just that those types of little things that if they happened in certain ways, you wouldn't be here right now, Scott. You wouldn't be here with me on the For the Love of Sports podcast. So appreciate that the world works in mysterious ways. That's for sure.
There's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers.
Love it.
Have you read it? Yeah,
absolutely.
It explores people who are successful in their various fields. And, it starts with hard work and discipline and all these things that make this person special. But at the core of every one of these stories was luck. Bill Gates was this incredible business genius who also happened to go to the first high school in the U.S. where you could get programming time on a computer, and he could program on a computer while all the other kids were programming on paper. It's like he did all the work, but it started with right place, right time. And it's humbling. And when I read that book, I realized that as hard as I've worked to become successful at my sport, I also happen to be very lucky.
I don't like the word lucky. I think it has connotations that would assume everything is out of your control because you easily could have went to that park and then never worked hard to get to where you were, right? So I prefer the word fortunate. I think they're practically synonyms, but for some reason in my brain they kind of are separate. So you were fortunate to go to this park, but you were also worked extremely hard too then, right? You could have easily not.
Well,
it would have been probably easier.
It takes both. I think what
exactly.
It is. But it's just a way of being humble and not just thinking, well, I'm so high and mighty and so great. Opportunities, in other words. I was given an opportunity.
Yep.
So in my book, Growing Up Disc Golf, I even said of the 1 billion children on Earth, I lived closer to the world's first Frisbee golf course than any of them. In fact, one of my friends growing up, Marty, lived next door to me, but he was one house farther away from the course than me. Had he lived on the other side of me, he would have been the one kid in a billion that lived the closest to the world's first course. So, we can call it fortuitous.
We can call it a lot of things, but I call it incredible, and that's for sure. So appreciate that. But you ran with this, right? Like you then became one of the, if not the biggest disc golfer. Yeah, what actually am I supposed to call you? Is it disc golfer? Is that the proper term? Okay, cool. You became one of the biggest disc golfers on planet Earth to the point of, winning tournaments, having sponsorships up the kazoo. Like you had it all, man, and it was pretty incredible. I mean, what is it like to right? It's still a very niche sport, as you said, 18 million strong, so it's growing obviously, and it's doing great things. However, 15,000 courses, as you said, all across the world, which is where we'll get to you and all across the world in a little bit. But like, what was it like at the time? Like, what's that fandom like to be, the coolest kid amongst this kind of small group of kids and like doing really well and kind of everyone looking to you as like you're my Michael Jordan. Like, how cool is that?
So that would actually be not completely accurate. When
Okay.
I played in the '80s, and there were tremendous amounts of good players all over the world, mostly in the U.S., but other places who were very good. I certainly wasn't better than them in the '80s. I was just an up and coming kid. I was competitive, but I finished 20th at the World Championships in '87, so respectable, but not standout.
Hmm.
In the '90s, when I peaked as a player, I was never the best disc golfer in the world. I was chasing a player named Ken Climo. Pick a sport. I was Michael Jordan's Karl Malone.
Ah, that's still not
No,
bad.
hey, well, yeah, yeah, yes and no. You know,
Yeah.
at the time, every time I lost the World Championships to Ken, I finished second place a couple times. I bawled my eyes out. It was tragic. It was like I wasn't proud of it. I was devastated. But when you get older and you look back, at the time there were, between 500,000 and 1 million people that played, and I finished number two. It's like, hey, it's pretty darn good. But at the time, like if you're happy with second place at the time, you're not finishing in the top 100. Like you only finish second place because you're disappointed that you didn't win. It's the mindset you have to be an athlete or competitive, probably at anything. But I can for sports for sure. Second place is it's uh, yeah, it's hard to stomach. But now I'm proud of it. Now I'm certainly, and I won a number of national titles, U.S. titles, in the world of distance throwing, actual, which is another. It's a smaller event, but just throwing distance, I was number one for many years. I set all the world records. So I got my accolades, but I wasn't the Michael Jordan of disc golf. I was the, it was the every sport's got got that guy. So I was that guy.
You need a car like the
Yeah.
NBA needed their Karl Malone, man. So I mean, I guess it's worse places to be. It's unfortunate you're always runner up, and everyone's always going to remember you for never winning. But maybe that's not the case with you because people still love and adore you as a person, as a personality, which I think is very important too. So maybe my Michael Jordan analogy wasn't perfect, but at the same time, it's as you said, 1 million disc golfers. I assume just about all of them, if they pay attention to the sport, know you in some capacity.
Sure.
And with the sport being small, as you were telling me prior, most of you were making very good money at the time, especially mostly through sponsorship. Like actually going to these events and winning was only, moving your bottom line slightly. It was more the sponsorships. And there's only a few of you
Yeah.
that were actually able to obtain some of these sponsorships because of how small the sport was at the time. What was, I guess, that aspect of it like, kind of being one of the bigger personalities or one of the bigger players on tour to the point where this is a livelihood for you, whereas most people, this is more of a hobby.
So I did make the most money, and this is one of the things I try to teach. Well, I call them kids. A lot of them are 30 years old, but
Yeah,
they're kids to me. And I try to mentor as much as possible. And what I try to convey as much as anything is that as a professional athlete, you have two scoreboards you're competing on, right? You have the scoreboard everybody knows, which is how many in our sport, how many strokes under par did you win the tournament? But in any sport, wins and losses, strikeouts, 3-point shots, whatever. That's a scoreboard, but it's not the only one. You have another scoreboard over here, which is your bank account. And this scoreboard, your bank account has zero impact over this scoreboard. This scoreboard can affect this one, but it doesn't have to, or it doesn't as much as people think. And I've always felt like I was competing on both scoreboards. I wanted to put my kid through college. I wanted to make a living and not sit in a cubicle or hang drywall for a living. I wanted to do frisbee. And that's the only scoreboard that mattered for that. So in the 90s, I was the first player to get a real good sponsorship deal. At the time, it was $40,000 a year, money, actual cash money. But then I also got merchandise to sell. So I traveled around the country running events, selling merchandise, and I made over $100,000 a year for a few years in the 90s. So I bought a condo. I was the first disc golfer to be a homeowner from playing disc golf. And that was exciting. That's, but that was because I focused on that scoreboard. That's always been a part of it. And I actually find that scoreboard nearly as much fun to compete in. Like, I do feel like it's a competition. I am beating a lot of players who are better than me at disc golf now on one of my two scoreboards. And that's the competitive part of me.
Where does the competition for that scoreboard come from for you, and why do you believe not as many others take that piece of the game as serious?
I don't know. I think that a lot of players just misunderstand the business of sports. They think, and I'll just take my sport as an example, but it applies to every single sport out there. A player thinks that if they're sponsored by a disc manufacturer, that winning tournaments matters. It's irrelevant to the manufacturer. Like the formula for sponsorship in any sport is exactly the same. If a company sponsors you, how much more profit will they see because they sponsor you? And if they see more profit, you can negotiate for a part of that profit. And they're not giving you that because it's honorable, and you don't get that money because you're entitled. You get that money because if they don't give you that money, a more savvy business person at a company will see the value in giving you a percentage of their profits to sponsor you. It's all about moving that bottom line. And I don't think players, a lot of it is just youth, or just not being business minded, but they don't see that is fundamentally what it's all about. I'll tell you the most glaring example of this. I see this all the time in mixed martial arts. One person says, "Why am I getting paid less than that person? I'm the champion." And it is like, I'm screaming at my phone. It's because that person sells 5 times as much merchandise as you. It's not relevant that you're the champion. It's only relevant that you're the champion because as the champion, you sell more tickets to your fights. It's all about moving that needle. So I just think it's just ignorance, I guess, naivety, youth. all of us old people, by the way, think younger people are naive. So that's it comes with age.
I think the older I get, the more I believe that too. So I can't really blame you there. I also realize that I'm actually more naive the older I get, which I think makes me less naive too.
It's both. Well, and the other part is that a lot of people, they don't think it's the fun part, and so they don't do it. And it's like,
I don't know, vacations are fun. Like, you need money to go on nice vacations, right?
Part of your, unless you're a very small percentage of athletes who play in sports where they have a machine doing the work for you, and the NBA, Major League Baseball, you don't need to do any self-promotion in those sports if you're good at the sport. You'll make more money if you do, but you don't have to. But in any other sport, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, that is every bit as much a part as nutrition, training, practicing, as far as your business. Now, if you don't care about the money at all, which I think everyone does, but if you truly don't care about the money, then who cares about your social media? But if that matters to you, then that is part of your job. It is literally part of your job to tell your fans about the injury that you had and about your rehabbing, and with pictures from the clinic. Like, that is part of your job. And it's not necessarily fun for a lot of people, and it's work. It's not Frisbee golf. It's actually doing the work. But that's how that's how you make your living.
That's the rub, though, man. Like, they're playing Frisbee golf because they love disc golf, Frisbee golf, whatever we're calling it now. They play that because they love it, right? They don't love posting on social media. I do this podcast because I love having conversations with you. My least favorite part is then editing all these shows. Like, that's the work. I do this every day. Like, I'd pay somebody to let me do this every day. it's the editing, it's the clips, it's the posting, it's all that shit that I hate about this. Well, not even hate, but like that's the part that I consider the work when it comes to this. So it's probably very similar for some of these guys, and it's a tough pill to swallow, right? Especially in a sport like yours, it's a little bit smaller, where if they do want to make money doing it, right? And I'm sure the burnout rate, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that they could keep playing, but they're not making enough. They're trying to start a family. They're trying to buy their condo in the 90s, right? Like, it's got to be difficult for them to continuously hit their head over the wall with the same thing and be like, well, I hate this part. I'm just going to try and get better at disc golf. It's like, well, prize money's not big enough, bud. Like, and you have like 10 people that are routinely in front of you. This is going to get really difficult. So how, I mean, we're going to skip a little bit of the story because I think this is a nice little segue, but like, how are you, as you said, you're mentoring a lot of these guys, you're trying to help them. Like, how did you build your brand? How were you able to go out and really build a big enough brand to the point of you saying, I don't really, I can then monetize this group of people because they love me so much and I'm giving them that much value?
So, okay, the first lesson that every athlete should be required to do by their agent or their manager is they need to study professional wrestling, because professional
Awesome.
wrestling dominates the world of self-promotion and branding. And by the way, like Muhammad Ali was a diehard pro wrestling fan.
Hey, I got nothing against it. You enjoy it, you
Yeah,
enjoy it. Smoke
but
them
as
if you
far
got 'em.
as the business side of it, it is all about self-promotion. And one of the things you'll learn in pro wrestling is if you're fake, I know the sport is, scripted, right? But if you are a fake personality, if you are acting completely out of character for yourself, people will see through it. They won't follow you. You will not engage the audience. So you have to be real. But you turn the volume up to 11. If you're funny, be hilarious. If you like teaching disc golf, be the best teacher. If you're humble and just sweet and don't like trash talking, you can be successful at that. But make sure you're way more humble than everybody else. You turn the volume up on who you really are. So you're not fake, but you're just exaggerating that personality. And then take that personality and then build your audience. Be real. You will attract an audience of people that are attracted to that. Like, not everybody likes Conor McGregor because of the trash talking. Conor McGregor doesn't need everybody to like him. He needs enough people to like him to buy his whiskey and buy his pay-per-views. And so he's him with the volume turned up. And that's where the branding starts. Honesty. You will attract an audience of people that connect with you. The way you communicate, your sense of humor, the way you dress, the way you handle yourself. Like, you will attract those people, and then you build that audience. And once you have that audience, you can turn that audience into a business. That audience will take your classes, come to your clinics, buy your shirts, subscribe to your channel, buy your sponsors' discs. But it starts with you're building that following by being real. It's critical.
How long did it take? How long did it take you to like figure that out? Because that's, well, it makes sense. It's not rocket science, right? As you explained it, and a lot of people have figured it out before you, and many will figure it out after. How long did it eventually take you to be like, hey, if I did this, this could potentially turn into something?
I don't think I knew that so much in the 90s. I was approaching it like a business. I knew that if I went out there and I merchandised and ran events, I was an entrepreneur. I invented all these different ways of monetizing the sport that I was the first person to do. But I think I was successful just because no one else was doing it. In hindsight, I did a poor job at it, but I was the only one, so I got away with it. But when I left the sport, I got into running internet businesses, and I learned about, and the internet's the best at teaching this, is how scalable things are. You do something that makes $1. Well, if you do 10 times that, you make $10. Holy cow, I can do 10,000 times that and make $10,000. I think I just messed that up, but
No, it works. It works.
but basically you can scale. So when it comes to having an audience, like, yeah, you don't make a whole lot of money if you have 1,000 followers on YouTube. But if you have 10,000, you'll make 10 times that. It doesn't translate exactly, but roughly. And so it quickly realized it's the audience first, because having 1,000 followers making a certain amount of money, and then trying to get convinced 10 times, or try to convince 10 times as many of your followers to buy your product is way more difficult, if not impossible, but way more difficult than just getting 10 times as many followers. That's where it's just numbers. It's all math, and it scales. And the more people that follow you, that's where it starts. And it has to start there. One of the things I teach people is don't even try to monetize your brand for years. Because if you have 50 people and you're trying to sell them stuff, you're not going to build an audience if the first thing they see is you're trying to sell something. You build the audience first. I actually I do these throwing clinics where I travel around the country teaching disc golf. I did 500 cities for free. Now, I was able to monetize it because I was at events, and at these clinics I had merchandise for sale, so I was able to pay it. But I purposely made my clinics free, 500 of them, as I built a reputation as the best teacher in the sport. I built my audience because it cost nothing to come out. And if they wanted to buy something to put gas in my tank, I would sell them something. But audience first. So I guess maybe I was doing some of this early on, but it was by accident. It wasn't because I was smart. But that's what.
How do you know when is a good time? Especially, again, speaking in your experience, speaking to golfers that you work with now, disc golfers that you work with now and help. How do you know when is a good time? Is there a follower number? Is there an engagement number that you look at? You say, once you hit here, you can at least start asking. Maybe don't hard sell them all the time, but you can start asking.
Around 50, I think for me, 50,000 followers is a good number, because that's 15,000 on YouTube. That's 18,000 on Instagram, 10,000 on Facebook. I mean, it's a very realistic number that you can get to just by consistently posting for a year or two. You still have to be interesting or entertaining or funny or educational or something, but you'll get to that number. Then what you do is you have to gauge the results. I learned very quickly, not very quickly, that's not the right word. I learned by studying just how much space I could be marketing my products before I start to lose my audience. And if I oversell, then you lose subscribers. I mean, I'm sure you've had this experience. You subscribe to a YouTube channel for a long time. They weren't selling anything, and next thing you know, they spend the first 90 seconds talking about the Ridge wallet or becoming a what do you call it, a lord or a lady in England or whatever they're.
Oh, yeah. That one's funny.
And it's
that
like
one gets me every
after
time.
you see 2 or 3 or 4 of those from the same person, like you start to tune out of that person. So there's a point of diminishing return. Like even now, I don't advertise products or talk about selling things on a lot of my videos, because I've learned that if I do it every single time, I make less money than if I do it infrequently, because my audience likes the fact that they don't usually have to listen to an ad. They will listen to it if it's not often. But again, you have to just track your audience. You have to track the numbers. I've also learned that you have to be very targeted in what you market. Every time you try to do something, like let's suppose, okay, this is a hypothetical. Let's suppose
Totally
there's some idiot, and we'll call him an idiot, in some alternative sports who thinks that they could sell barbecue sauce just by putting their face on it. Right? They're trying to.
Very hypothetical. I just want to make sure
So
everyone's
this
totally aware of
person
this.
thinks that just because people will buy their sports merchandise, that they're going to turn around and buy barbecue sauce. And, it may turn out that it doesn't translate, that people don't want to buy barbecue sauce, right? So I
Did this person talk about grilling and barbecue sauce and ribs prior to trying to sell the barbecue sauce?
Had he done that for the previous year leading up to the launch of the barbecue sauce, and had he been doing barbecue joint reviews and built up credibility within the barbecue community, that probably wouldn't have been a good move. No, but again, this is something I had to learn. I had to learn that I've never successfully sold a product outside of my sport. Doesn't mean I can't, but I have not cracked that code yet. And so, but I learned this by looking at the numbers and tracking it. And, it's basically I have a certain amount, I'll call it bandwidth. I have a certain amount of bandwidth to market products. And if I spend 10% of my time marketing barbecue sauce, then I need to be making 10% of my total income with that 10% of time. So even though, yes, I sold some barbecue sauce and made some money, the amount of money I made with that 10% of the time I was marketing the sauce was not equal to what I could have made marketing something else. Therefore, even though it appears that I made money, I didn't. I actually lost money. I'll take it a step further, is that smaller companies might contact me and say, hey, I'd like to sponsor you. We'll pay you, a couple $100 a month. And all you got to do is mention our product, 6 times in social media or something. And it seems like, well, I would turn it down. And it's like, well, why would you turn it down? It's a free $300 a month. Well, it's not $300 a month. I lose far more than $300 marketing your product rather than something else I'm doing. But again, you have to track numbers. If you don't track numbers, you're just like closing your eyes, throwing darts at a dartboard and like hoping you hit the bullseye. Like you have to look to see where the darts go in order to get good at throwing darts.
What gets measured gets managed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the quote there. And yeah, like if you don't actually know what you're looking at, if you're just throwing darts, we all saw that clip on the internet the other day, which was just electric of those guys throwing darts. But if you're just throwing darts to throw darts just to see what will happen, and then you don't actually know if it's worth it or not, like you make a really good point. Like it's a free $300 or it's a free $500 a month, but in reality, you understand that your audience is not going to take 6 extra posts about this product just thrown in. Right? Like you understand your audience to the point where you have to then take away other advertising posts to supplement for this. And you're actually making less money because you'd be making more money if you kept the other ones in rotation as you already did. So it's a really great way of looking at it. I think it's really smart from an influencer perspective. Do you call yourself an influencer actually?
I don't like to call myself that, only because when I see YouTube influencers or Instagram influencers, I'm like, I don't want to be like them. But technically, true.
Yeah,
technically,
I get that.
It's actually a very good word. I mean, it's actually kind of what you do. Now,
yeah. Well, athletes were the original influencers, right? That Michael Jordan commercial and that Larry Bird commercial for McDonald's, like they were the first influencers.
Yeah, for sure.
It.
Within sports, yeah. I mean, people figured out. Well, no, I would even go back. I would say the first influencers in sports that I could think of would be the baseball players that got put on like playing cards, chewing gum, tobacco.
Yep.
I mean, you want to talk about being woefully underpaid. A lot of them did it just because it was neat to have their picture on the card.
If only they had Scott Stokely to help them build their brand, man.
I remember reading a story about when they were trying to convince players in baseball to start pursuing this new free agency thing, because they had to change the law to even allow for free agency. And they would ask the players about, hey, you can make a lot more money for this team over here. And some of the responses would be like, yeah, but whenever we're in New York, he takes us out to a steak dinner. So like, why would I go pursue other financial options? And these guys are making like $60,000 a year playing for the Oakland A's. And they're like, but he buys me a steak dinner. And it's like, it was actually one individual, I don't recall his name, but there was one individual that just broke through that whole market and was like, that when you go to this team, that team makes, like back then, like $15 million more per year because they brought you on. And every team in the league would make $15 more per year if you were on their team. You can make more than $50,000 a year.
You could buy yourself a steak dinner, but yeah, I think that's. Look at that. Take it in your own.
By the way, I do want to add one more piece to the whole barbecue thing because. Because
please.
It's a metaphor for something really important as an entrepreneur. Was that I said I made money. I made money because I sold barbecue sauce. I lost money with the barbecue sauce. But the thing that's so important about the barbecue sauce is the only reason my successful ventures exist was because of a mindset for I'm going to try this thing that might fail. And with the barbecue sauce, the investment was money, but with other things, the investment a lot of times is just time and effort. But the successful things they only exist because of the willingness to fail at them. So I don't look at any of the failures as failures because they had to. Like, no one's 100%. No one bats 1,000 as an entrepreneur. At least I've never, I've never heard of that person. So you have the failings just get absorbed into this whole big picture, which is, how is my overall company doing? My overall company right now is crushing it, and I'm doing better than I've ever done in my life. So those aren't failures. Those are just part of the, like, I had to fail at some.
Couple, yeah, no, you have. I mean, exactly. And as you said, it then allowed you to understand that if you now know not to venture outside of your
Yeah.
sphere of influence, right? Like, just because you put your face on barbecue sauce, just because, Kiss put their faces on calculators, doesn't mean everyone's going to be going to buy a
Kiss,
Kiss
wait,
calculator
Kiss was on a
anytime soon, right?
calculator.
So Kiss was on it. Kiss sold
Well,
out,
I
man.
don't.
Kiss was on
Yeah. Hey, by
everything.
the way, bravo to Kiss.
Yeah, I'd sell out. I'd sell out in a second. I don't get why it's such like a
It,
negative
it's
connotation. Like, yeah, I want to
it's
make money.
negative when
How
you're
cool is
young
that?
and you're idealistic about the world, and you think that there's something
Yeah,
about being an artist. It's like, no, you got to pay the rent. Like,
yeah,
keep the electricity on and then do your art, but you got to pay that electric bill first. Oh, but I knew that Kiss had with
exactly.
their faces on everything. I just didn't know they were on calculator. Hold on a second,
Yeah.
Adriana, please look into calculators. I want to be on a calculator now.
Yes. Oh, can you send? So I was gonna ask if you could send me some barbecue
I'm
sauce
happy.
too. But once you get the
Yeah,
calculator thing situated, please
I'll,
send me
I'll
a
send you some
calculator as well.
barbecue
I'd
sauce. It's
love.
actually very good. It's
I'm sure.
really it's good.
I love it. That's just too funny. And you, again, going back to the actual point at hand here, right? It's the fact that you then understood that you can't take away from your core audience. You can't just shove something down their throat. They're gonna. So that was a learning experience from you, and then again, it's allowed you, because you're able to say no to so many things now, and some of the things that you do say yes to, you're gonna go full force into. Your audience is gonna see that, right? They're gonna engage with that further, and they're gonna buy more of the things that you're actually selling. So if you don't mind, Scott, you said your business is the best. It's booming, best it's ever been. You're in Singapore right now, as we are recording this. So I'm 6 o'clock at night. Scott is graciously up at 6 o'clock in the morning and doing well, man. I would have guessed you've been up for hours at this point. But what are some of the things that you're doing, traveling around the world with your business doing as well as it is?
A lot. So one of the things I like to do is, I don't like to put my focus into one thing. I like to have, I call it a disc golf mutual fund. I don't. I'll put all my
Oh,
investment into one specific product line, because then that product line could fail. But as long as disc golf doesn't fail, my mutual fund will do well. I teach an online class, so I have a 6 month online class called "Become a Complete Disc Golfer," where I do live classes, multiple live classes every month. I have trainers that are working, so people upload videos of themselves throwing in the class for form reviews. I have full day seminars, which I have people teaching for me in the U.S. I have a handful of people teaching these seminars. While I travel, I do throwing clinics. Like, I'll be in Singapore doing a clinic for the Singapore Disc Golf Club tomorrow, right? Yeah, tomorrow morning. I have a bunch of product lines that my name's on, that I get money when those products sell. I have a smaller portion of it is things like Cameo, YouTube ad revenue, Patreon, things like that. I have a number of, I have a clothing line, Zone Sporting Goods, that I endorse. This is not from Zone, but Zone. I have a line of golf discs out called the Stokely Universe discs, which are a series of discs. I hired an artist named Creative Rob. Every month he produces a brand new original full color design on disc, so it's a collector series that's out. I have and I'll go ahead and tease this a little bit. I have a phone game coming out in a month that's going to be big. I have a documentary that's coming out in a couple months. I got other products that I haven't announced yet. So I just have my hands in a lot of different things. One thing I do is, aside from the teaching part, is everything I do is with partnerships. I believe so strongly in having partnerships, because there are so many people that are better at certain parts of the business than I am that it makes no sense for me to, like, I don't know anything about running a distribution warehouse. Even if I lived in a place and wasn't traveling full time, because I travel full time, I live on the road. Even if I lived in a place, like, I would never run the warehouse. That's not my area of expertise. You don't save money by not hiring someone who's good at what they do. You hire someone who's good at what they do to do it, and I also believe in partnerships, because if people have a stake in the they have a stake in the game.
Stake in the game.
Which, by the way, it's a double-edged sword, because if when you employ somebody, you can also fire them, and you can also demand they do things you tell them to do. Partner, you can't do that. So it's a tricky thing to navigate. Partnerships are notorious for failing. I've had failed partnerships as well. So it's not definitely the best way to go. There's pros and cons, but I like cultivating partnerships. That's my personal belief, for me. And so I allow artists to do the art, and I allow the people to make their shirts, and I have people to manufacture. I don't try to design golf discs. Like, what do I know about designing golf discs? That would be my life's work, to learn how to be a golf disc designer, when I can just let someone design the discs. So I'm a real big believer in that. So I have a percentage of different things. I'm like, the video game I own a third of. We have developers and investors and all sorts of people that are so far beyond my scope of the world.
And I think it's cool that you're able to do that. And as you said, it's kind of, I love your analogy of the mutual fund, right? Because it's, hey, some of these things might do really well. Some of these things might not. Some of these things might fail, as we've seen, if you're not trying, if you're not failing, you're not trying, right? So I love the analogy of the mutual fund, because as you said, as long as the sport of disc golf doesn't fail, a couple of these things are going to do good enough, right? And that's, the clinics, right? As you said, the coaching, the seminars, like, you have all these things where people can still come and meet you and talk to you and have time specifically with you. It's one thing to buy your product. It's another time. It's another thing to have that time specifically with you, right? And those are the types of things that the engagement really comes from. And you're all around the world. You're getting people in Singapore to come hang out with you for a day, right? Pay a couple dollars, and you can go on your way. They have now a life experience that they're going to be able to tell all their friends about, right? That are in this community that they love so much. So I think it's awesome that you've been able to cultivate this community and really utilize it. And I think it's like, this is getting me all jazzed up, right? Like, I ironically said to my wife the other day, like, I think I want to be an influencer, because I think I'd be an awesome spokesperson. I use beef jerky because I love beef jerky. Like, let me go on podcasts and talk about beef jerky, like a company that I love, dude. I'll to the nines. That company will be great. But, like, I don't have the influence yet, and that's okay. I'm not really, like, trying. It was more of just an ingest conversation. But, like, it's one of those things where, like, it sounds like you're having a really great time, and it sounds like it's kind of easy, but it's not really that easy. It's actually extremely difficult, and it's a lot of hard work, as you alluded to.
Easy.
And yeah,
it's I actually, like, all my videos, I have video editors whose entire job is to make sure that I give the impression that I'm just walking around like some goofball with a cell phone making videos. So I don't overproduce stuff on purpose, but I have video people making sure the sound's good, the lighting's good, to give this appearance that is way more relatable, because I'm just a guy with a cell phone, talking first person. I try to do very little edits, but I pay people to do very little edits. So it's like, it's way, way, way more work. I'll talk about it on a podcast, but I never talk about how much work I do on my channel, because that's not what people want to follow. They want to follow the adventure. They don't want to hear that, like, I got up at 5 a.m. to do a podcast. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody that. Well, your audience, but it's
yeah. Thank you.
But by the way, it can very quickly cross over into, it sounds like I'm complaining about my life too, which would be, like, oh, I work really hard, and someone else is like, yeah, well, so do I, but I'm not in Singapore, so shut up. Like that, no one wants to hear that guy. But yeah, I work. I mean, every day. If we get on, we're going to go somewhere today in Singapore on the train. I'll be on the train answering messages and posting and doing work. We live actually a very unusual life as well, as far as how we live. Every single thing, my girlfriend and I would pan over, but it's a G-rated show. No, No, we learned very quickly on podcasts. She's always dressed in the podcast because if the phone turns accidentally, yes, that
You
and not
never
that
know.
ever happened once or twice.
Of course
Twice.
not.
Yeah, that didn't happen twice. Um, but
Okay.
every single thing we own in this world is in our hotel room right now. We don't have a storage unit. We don't have a home base. We don't have a box of pictures, family stuff, nothing. We have one suitcase, two backpacks, and that's all we own. We gave away everything else. And actually, we are getting rid of the suitcase today and we're turning it into two backpacks. So we live and will never stop as full-time nomads. We just travel and we stay at hotels. We just live on the road. And so we don't have those responsibilities that you have in your day-to-day life. Like we don't have any monthly bills except for like international health insurance and a couple things. We have we have all the daily
Cell
expenses
phone?
of hotels and meals and everything that comes with traveling. But it's a very unique type of life we live, and this in part this is not an accident. I mean, I built my business in the U.S., but I built it so I could travel internationally. That's why I started hiring people to run my seminars. That's why I started teaching online classes that I can do from anywhere in the world. That's why I have partnerships all over the world now, so I can live this way. And actually, go big picture, that is to me the number one key to happiness is to figure out how you want to live your life, and then the rest is logistics. Like, how could I accomplish living this way? And so it took me several years to completely transform my business to where I could travel internationally. Before I was traveling in the U.S., I was doing seminars. I was doing all the work locally. But I built my business to allot me the life that I want.
That's incredible, man. It's very inspirational, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there listening that would say, that sounds awesome. I would like to do that. I guess what's the first
The
step?
first step is to identify what is going to make you happy. And I actually talk about this a lot, and I speak about this often. You have to, in my opinion, throw away every single preconceived idea you have about how to live life. Everything your parents told you, everything your school told you, everything the church told you, everything movies told you, everything TV, everything your friends told you, everything you ever read in a book. Just throw it out and start from scratch and say, if I could have it exactly how I want, what would it look like? Relationships. Everyone knows in relationships, you get married. If you're straight, you get married to someone of the opposite sex. If you're not, you'll get married to someone of the same sex. But then you get married, you're in a monogamous relationship, you're probably going to try to have a family in most cases. You're going to build your 401k so then you can retire. Well, maybe monogamy is not for everybody. Maybe being married is not for everybody. Maybe having relationships at all isn't for everybody. But everyone kind of goes into this mode because that's what society and everything says you're supposed to do. Step back and look at it. And then if you decide, hey, you know what? I think a monogamous relationship with children is what I truly want. Well, then pursue that. But also be willing to say that's not the type of life I want. And the same thing with your career, and the same thing with your religion, and the same thing with your, like everyone knows you want to be a homeowner and have a mortgage, and everyone knows the suburbs are better than the city, or maybe small towns are better. But maybe it turns out that you don't want to have a home once you actually evaluate it. So the first part is to just start from scratch and evaluate and construct, number one, how you want to live, what your life is going to look like, relationships, business, everything. And then work backwards from there. Well, how can I get there? Because you're not going to be able to do that today. I think a good example is you might have a job that you hate. And it's like, but you have a mortgage and you have kids, you have responsibilities, and those have to come first because you've taken that responsibility on. Well, I want to quit my job doing this thing that I hate. Well, maybe you can't do that today, because if you do it today, you take such a loss in income that you're not going to be able to take care of these responsibilities. So people then say, well, I'm stuck in my job. Well, no, wait a second. it just means you can't do it today. Maybe it's going to take a 4-year plan to go back to school and study the thing that you love. Maybe an 8-year plan because you can only study 2 days a week. Okay, 8 years. Well, you're going to be an adult for the next 50. Can you sacrifice 8 to have 42 better years? Well, if you decide that you can, maybe you do that. So you construct how you're going to get there. It may be as easy as quitting your job and finding a better job, or selling your house and moving from a big city to a small town because you decide that's what you like. That's an easy thing to do, or it could be difficult. But you can't even think about these decisions until you know what you want and what's going to make you happy. And again, I can't stress this enough. Throw away everything anybody or anything's ever told you about what life is supposed to look like, because there's not a one size fit all. Like, you got to figure out your path, and I think that's the only way to be happy, or else you're in a box. You're in a box that someone else built for you. I don't mean like a house. I mean, you're in a world. You're in someone else's happiness bubble, not your own.
I love that. That's beautiful, Scott. I think it's important for people to hear. It's important for people to understand that, like, especially now with the internet, right? As you've clearly shown, like, you're capable of making money all over the world, and you can never have a house, and you only need. I mean, how many shirts do you guys own? Out of curiosity, if you only have 2 backpacks, what's that,
Yeah,
like 5 shirts?
I have one thing of competition clothing which I'm shipping off to Europe because I'll be competing in Europe over the summer, where I got to wear a very specific. I mean, I don't have to, but I wear very specific professional looking clothing. But until Europe, I probably will have five or six shirts.
Yeah, and so clearly people can live like that. It is a possibility. So maybe you don't have to go all the way like you guys, but there's the opportunity, there's the possibility to do it however you would like. There's a very big spectrum for life that I don't think people realize. Everyone does go down that bubble, down that hole of, this is what I'm going to do. I need to be married by X. I need to have a kid by Y. I have to make X dollars. I need to put so much money away in my 401k. And, like, I believe in some of those things. I don't believe in all of them. And believe I'm truly happy. And, if I was to be the happiest I ever was, Scott, I would just do this podcast for the rest of my life. And Spotify would give me a $100 million deal. But until then, I get to keep talking to cool people like yourself. So I appreciate it.
It doesn't have to happen right away. We started off, my girlfriend had traveled in an RV for 7 years, and I had done the disc golf tour for 10 years before we met. So we were both full-time travelers, or, at times. But when we took off together to decide 3 years ago to travel together, after we decided we wanted to travel together, we were in an RV. And then we realized we don't need that much stuff. And then we took that down to a trailer, like a 4x6 trailer, not to live in. Like, we were pulling a 4x6 trailer because that's how much stuff we still felt like we needed, which is not much, but it's still, we needed a 4x6 trailer worth of stuff. Well, one of the best things that could have happened was that trailer got stolen in Oklahoma City. Everything we owned was just stolen.
Oh, no.
And we're like, well, oh my God, it's going to cost us all the money to replace it. Well, but what in there do we need to replace? And we couldn't come up with literally not one single thing in that trailer that we actually needed. There wasn't a single thing, was there? We lost some pictures of our kids and some personal stuff that we would certainly, if we had the choice, would love to have it at our parents' house, right? I mean, so it's...
Have those back.
We're not, trying to make a point by not owning stuff, but all of our photographs from our kids and our families were stolen in the trailer. And then there wasn't anything there we needed to replace. And then we said, well, then I guess we're fine. We don't need anything else. So even, it's not like we're geniuses who figured all this out exactly perfectly at the beginning. It wasn't until a couple of years ago that we really realized that a backpack was enough for us.
I wish you could talk to my wife, man. That would be awesome. Maybe she could throw some shit out. That would be pretty cool. But until then,
here's the thing I tell people.
I'll keep doing my best.
There's nothing wrong with stuff if stuff is what makes you happy. Well, maybe, but not for
There's
everybody.
too much of it.
Like, some people, they make fun of the person, like, you just want to have the biggest boat in your driveway. And I'm like, well, what the hell's wrong with that? If that is what makes you happy, if what makes you happy is to drive down your street and just think to yourself, everybody's looking at my boat today. Like, if that does make you happy, you're not wrong for that. Like, there's nothing, like, some people kind of go, they basically get all high and mighty. They're like, well, we're minimalists, therefore if you own materialistic, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing wrong with being materialistic if you like material. If you like materials, it's just it has to be what you like, not what anybody else thinks.
Like Madonna said, man.
I got it right.
Like Madonna said. Scott, I love Madonna. Scott, this has been absolutely fantastic. I know we missed a little bit of the story, but I really appreciate the way this conversation ended up. I really appreciate your time and explaining kind of what you've done and how you've done it, how you're trying to help others and mentor others in the sport, because that's going to be best for the sport. It's going to be best for them. It's eventually going to come back and help you, right? So there's so many great things with that. But just really cool and interesting to see how you've been able to build businesses through such a niche sport in disc golf. And you've been able to then now take this and travel the entire world and do essentially whatever you would like, whenever you would like, through building these businesses. And I love the analogy you made of the disc golf mutual fund, that you have all these different hand in a bunch of different stuff. Eventually, enough of them will go up in an up to the right, hopefully, pattern that you'll end up continuously making money as long as the sport's around. So Scott, this has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming on the show,
something
man.
to this too. So, in the past 4 years, I've been able to teach 200. I've gone to 285 cities and taught 285 classes for kids and adults with special needs. All of those classes are free.
That's awesome.
Yesterday, I taught disc golf to teachers at an academy in Singapore. It's free. I don't charge the school to teach the teachers. I'll be teaching clinics all over Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, free. So, and by the way, that is what makes me happy. So one of the nice things is when you are successful financially, you can do the things you like to do. And to me, it's giving a lot of this stuff away. Giving away my time and doing those things. But I couldn't do those things if I wasn't making money over here. So like that, like you said, you got to keep the lights on first. If I was a starving altruist, I wouldn't be teaching any classes. I do far more good in the world by being successful.
I respect the hell out of that, man. That's incredible.
Sure.
Thank you for adding that. I appreciate it. This has been great, though. But thank you, Scott. I really do appreciate it. Where can everyone find you? Where can they read your book?
Yeah,
Where can they learn a little bit about that documentary that you got coming out?
Scott Stokely.
Give us all the stuff.
If you search for Scott Stokely on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, my name will pop up because I have so much content out there. But scottstokely.net is where the starting place for all my classes, all my teaching, where to buy my book, where to my store, where to hear about my clinics. Everything starts there. The .com is the store, but you can get to the store from .net.
I was going to ask, was the .com, did someone buy Scott Stokely?
Well, actually, someone did own it
so
I had to start scottstokely.net, and then I was able to buy it back because I made enough money to buy back my own name. Camped on it.
Hey, okay, I told you that the peak was putting barbecue sauce on your face on barbecue sauce. Turns out buying your own name.com back from some other guy. I hope. Did he have the name Scott Stokely? I know we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but
the good thing is,
he just
one
did
of the nice things about the obscurity of disc golf is that he didn't charge me anywhere near as much as it was actually worth, because he probably thought, oh, frisbee golfer, But it was only a few years ago that a few $100s to buy my name back was not something that was in my. I mean, I could have done it, but I would have had to give up something in order to do it. So it's only been in the last few years that I've been doing really well.
Well deserved, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do. I think it is awesome for the sport, but just people, right? You're going to Malaysia to teach people how to play disc golf. How friggin' cool is that? Like, when you say it like that, it's pretty damn cool, man. So kudos and congratulations to you, Scott. I think it is absolutely fantastic. And sincerely, again, I appreciate you waking up early, coming on the show, sharing a little bit about your life. Sincerely, thank you for your time. Time is the only thing we don't get more of, so thank you for yours. And I thank the audience for giving us some of theirs. But other than that, man, I'll put everything in the show notes for everyone. And
Link and I'll share it.
This was great. Thanks so much,
it.
Scott. Thanks. Bye, everybody.